Hello, welcome to another video by Mox Marine. Apparently I am good at giving advice but not following my own advice. So I'm building this 5.7 liter Vortec V8, small block V8. This is circa 1996, 1999 to go in a boat. And this is going to a Volvo Penta, by the way. And so I got all seven. I was putting 8 pistons in this engine. And when I got to number 1, actually when I started with number 1, I noticed a problem. And the problem was that the rod is apparently on backwards. So I took this, I've already taken it apart. I probably should have left it together to show you in the video, but the rod was assembled on the piston and the rod was assembled backwards. So why did I say that? So when you put the bearing in, this is called the bearing cap, rod cap, and if you'll notice the bearing is offset to one side versus the other. There's clearance over here and there's not that much clearance over there. So this side here, where my finger's pointing to over here, goes against this surface right here. And the reason is, there's just a very tiny little fillet in here, a little curvature where the flatness of this metal turns into that surface there. And there's a tiny little radius in there. And so this bearing is offset to the side to clear that radius. So the bearing doesn't ride up onto the on that radius and it'll bind up. So if you have it installed backwards, the proper way this cap sits is like this down on there. So that the clearance is on the left side of your screen. So if you install it backwards, it'll sit like that, and you won't have clearance for the radius, and it'll bind up. So I did research to make sure. I was pretty sure it was true, but I did research, and sure enough, it's obvious if you look at where the bearing sits. It's common sense. So the bottom line is, if you put a rod on the piston backwards, you can't install it that way. You got to fix it. So to fix it, so what happened was I paid a machine shop probably a year ago. I think they did it for free, actually, because I bought some pistons from them and they put them on the rods for me for free since I bought my parts from them. But they came in about a year ago, and I just let them sit around in stock in a box. And when I actually got ready to use them, they didn't work. One rod was installed backwards. And I've done videos before where I've said you need to check your parts, new parts, used parts, machine shop parts. You need to check them as soon as you get them, as soon as they come in and put them in inventory, or you put them on before you put them on your engine. You need to check them right away so that you can either return them or give it back to machine shop and let them correct it. If you wait too long, especially if you buy parts new, they're going to be out of warranty, or they won't take them back after a certain amount of time, especially a year or more. And machine shop may or may not take them back. Depends on how good a relationship you have with your machinist. I have a pretty good relationship with my machinist. I'm not faulting him for doing this. So everybody makes mistakes. I've made some. So the point is, you need to catch them early so you can get them fixed. So now I'm in the middle of making this motor, and I've got to stop and fix this problem. So as I said, I have 2 choices. I send it back to machine shop, which is about 90 miles away, and it take a week or so to get them back. So I'm not going to do that. I just so happen, since I'm a shop and I build several motors in a given week, I have the ability to do it myself. So I have this press. I have a 20-ton shop press, and I press that piston. I press this rod. I press the pin out of the rod and press it out of the piston, and separate them. So normally, 9 times out of 10, when you do that, unless you support this piston just right, it's going to crack or distort, and it's ruined. So you cannot reuse a piston that after you press the rod off. However, this is the piston that I pressed off, and the wrist pin slides freely in both directions. So apparently this is one of the first times I've ever pressed a piston right off, a pressed wrist pin piston, and didn't damage the piston, at least as far as I can tell. I would think if it distorted, this would not move at all. This is a very tight tolerance and clearance, and so if it bent or distorted, that won't slide back and forth like it does. So I think the piston's okay. It didn't crack it. There's no cracks in it, and the pin, what helped is the pin broke free a lot easier than it usually does. So I think that's what saved the piston. But I already had this new piston. I'm going to save this piston for probably an engine of my own that I built for myself. I've got 3 boats that I bought as fixer-uppers, and I'm going to fix them up, rebuild the engines, and sell them. But I'll use them for a little while for myself, just to prove that they work. But Bottom line is I'm gonna use this piston in an engine of my own and test run it before I sell it. So I'm taking a new piston, and I'm gonna put this rod back on the piston, and I have my own custom built rod heater, and I'm gonna set that up right now, and I'll show you how it works. Okay, I'm back. I'm now about to install this rod on this piston, and to do that, since it's a press fit, you need heat. You have to heat this rod, heat this end of the rod up to about 500, 550 degrees. And when you do that, that pin will slide right through just like a hot knife through butter. Actually, a cold butter through a hot knife. I don't know what you call it, but anyway. So I've got a homemade piston jig to hold the piston down. And I've got a homemade setup to heat the rod, which I'll show you in a minute. But to do this, so I've got the piston set up with the front. There's a notch or a dot on the front of the piston facing this way. It's right down under here. It's on the top of the piston facing that way. And I've got a dot on the rod. Let's see, right, I'll put a Sharpie on it so you can see it. There's a dot right there, you can barely see it. But so that dot tells me to put the rod facing the same way as the dot on the piston. I've already checked and make sure that's the front. And that's the mistake I made, or somebody made the first time. This rod was turned the other way around. So I'm about to heat the rod up and put it on the piston. And I have to have, use two hands to do that, so I can't show you on camera actually doing it, but I'll tell you how to do it. So I've got this lag screw, and I can turn it in and out of this block of wood, and that sets the depth that this pin will go. I can push it as hard as I want, it hits the stop, and it won't go any further. Okay, so the way I set that is I take this big end of the rod, and I set it in here, like so, and I try to put it in the middle, and I see how much clearance I've got on either side. You want about equal clearance on either side. And what I do is I look down in here, and when I put the pin right in the middle of its stroke, like right against, there's a groove in there, it's called a circlet groove. And if that wrist pin is centered in the piston, it'll be just on the edge of that circlet groove there. So I've got it set to where I've got this pin pushed back that way, about the width that the clearance of this surface here had inside there. Not both sides, just one side. Because when you push it over, when you install this rod, you have to make sure that you're kind of pushing it to the left, holding it to the left when you slam that wrist pin in there. And you got to hold this and make sure the wrist pin, you got to do it quick. You got about a second, maybe a second and a half for the heat, before it seizes up on it. It's when you first do this, you're going to have to get some used pistons or cheap pistons and play with it, because it's kind of like driving a car with a clutch on a hill. The first time, you're going to screw it up. You're going to break some pistons, or you're going to seize them up. I still seize them up every now and then, and I try to get my press ready and press them back out as fast as I can. But if you get more than about halfway, you're probably going to destroy the piston. So anyway, but you got to kind of hold this to the left, push the pin in, hold the pin in with the other hand, and then after about 2 or 3 seconds, it'll seize up and you're ready to go. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got my lighter. I've got my I've got some vice grips that the tension is just right to hold that snug, but not too tight. And this is what I hold it, so I don't have to hold the hot rod. And so obviously, I don't put the tool in the front flame. I grab the tool, I grab the rod with the tool cold, and then I bring it over here and do this. So I'm gonna get this toothbrush out of the way so I don't melt the thing, in case I drop it. So anyway, about to do this and put the rod on. I'll show you what the rod looks like in the flame, and then I'm gonna bring it over and put it on. So you might thinking, what is all this crazy redneck looking jury rig crap going on? So I'm an engineer. If I could figure out a way to do something, not spend a ton of money, I do it. I've been this way my whole life. I figure out ways to make things and build contraptions. I've got future plans for my channel to do some crazy stuff. But anyway, I'm proud of this. Some people may laugh at it, but I'm proud of the fact that I can make a piston, a jig, and this rod heater over here you're about to see, all for free. I got it's a propane grill that I repurposed as a rod heater. Well, I'll show you in a minute, but like I said, I repurposed as a rod heater, and it's been working great for 4 years. I've been able to press probably a few hundred pistons on by myself without having to go to the machine shop. Most of you are watching my channel or don't have this kind of equipment or tools. You can make it yourself, but If you're just doing one engine, just let a machine shop do it. They'll charge you $30 or $40 to $50 for pressing rods on and then be done. And they're experts at it. They have the proper equipment. So if you're doing just one engine, let them do it. But I've got myself conditioned and trained on how to do this, so it's not that big a problem for me. All right, I'm fixed to put this rod in the flame, and I'll show what that looks like. Okay, I've now got this rod in the my rod heater. You see it's a propane grill that I re-drilled and aimed the jets, the nozzles on these propane things. I'm gonna shut it back down because it's 10 seconds into it, and I don't wanna get too hot yet. Let me shut this off. So that's how it works. So this is my rod heater, been using it for years. It's worked great. So the trick to this is, with this much flame, you can probably just eyeball how much flame is going in here. I don't know what the BTU's rating of this grill is. Based on its size, you could take a guess. I would say if you have a 4-burner grill, this is the size of 1 burner, and just take the BTUs of that 4-burner grill and divide it by 4. But this is how many BTUs. So for this many BTUs that's flowing out of this grill, it takes me, it takes about 1 minute and 30 seconds. I leave the flame on high, both sides, with all the nozzles pointing toward the small end of the rod. You don't want to heat this end. It doesn't matter. There's no need to heat that end. You're just trying to heat this end. So I'm trying to direct all the flame to this point here, and it takes 1 minute and 30 seconds. 1 minute 15 seconds just doesn't quite get it. 1 minute 45, 2 minutes is too long. It starts glowing a little bit, or starts getting a little too hot. I've shot it with infrared thermometer, and it measures about 550, I'd say 500 to 600 degrees, depending on how you leave it in there, but I would say 550 is about average for about 1.5 minutes. And like I say, you grab it with the tool, you've got about, I get over to the piston in about 3 seconds, and then I have about 1 second. Once you push the pin through, you got maybe a second or a second and a half to get it in before it'll lock up on you. So it's kind of a nerve-wracking process, and I can't show it on the camera, but I'm about to heat it up, get it hot, and install it. Okay, it's done. Let the rod in the heater for about 1.5 minutes, 1 minute 30 seconds, and I brought it over here. I got the piston pin lined up in the hole and then shoved it through, and worked great. So like I say, I've been using this homemade piston jig for 4 years, and it's worked fantastic. I use that rod heater for other things, like if I'm putting on a trigger wheel on an LS crankshaft, putting a 24 tooth wheel on a 58 crank, or vice versa. You heat up the wheel and it'll drop onto a LS crank, no problem. So that concludes putting this piston back on. Once it cools down, I'm installing the engine, and be ready to put the heads on this engine. Okay, to make this video a little bit more informational, about to put number 1 piston that I just fixed, or had to move the rod to the flip the rod around, face another direction, and the rod and the piston assembly is now prepped, ready to go in. So I've got a bearing shell in here. This is a 20 thousandths thicker bearing shell, 020. It's probably remember the number. I think it's CB663P or something like that. So anyway, this it's a Cleveite bearing, it's a tri-metal. I've got these rubber protectors on the rod bolts so they don't hit the crankshaft and push down. And you put just a little tiny little like sliver, half moon sliver right there, so that it doesn't pinch, so that the rubber doesn't pinch against the bearing when it hits the crank. So I've got the rings on. I've already sized the rings, checked the ring size. Every bore, this is a 60,000 overbore, and so the general rule for a stock rebuild, these are not performance engines, they're just stock General Motors rebuilds. It's 0.004 inches for every inch of bore, so 4.060 times 0.004 comes out to a little bit under 17 thousandths clearance, ring gap clearance. So I've checked all my rings, and every one of them was better than was 0.017 or better. So all the ring gaps were already checked. I just installed the rings on the piston with the ring expander. If I can figure out what it is. This is what's called a ring expander. It's a manual device. And so I put the piston rings on with that. And so now I'm about to put it in the cylinder. The way I do it, you notice there's not a whole lot of oil in this cylinder. What I do is I put oil in the grooves of the, I find the gaps in the piston rings, turn them all up facing up, and squirt about 4 or 5 squirts of oil in the groove of, or in the gap of the ring, and then I rotate the rings around the piston. That puts oil in the ring grooves, and then also put some on the oil ring groove, spin it around, make sure the grooves are all lubricated. Then I put a few drops in the wrist pin on both sides, on here and on there, 4 places, 1, 2, 3, 4. That lubricates the wrist pin, and then I just put the piston in dry. I do not put oil on the piston or on the bore, and I slide it in. And so I push it, once I get it in with the ring, so this is a piston ring compressor. If you're not familiar with this, I've got tons of videos where I show how I'm using this, but this is called a piston ring compressor. Use that to squeeze the rings down. And so that's what pushes the piston down in here. By the way, you want to, so it's already lined up. You see I've got the crank pin, the wrist, the crank journal as far down as it'll go, so it can clear this as I'm pushing it down. And so anyway, about to put this piston in. If there's anything else I need to tell you, so when I push it all the way down, I push it against the crank. I don't jam it in or just push it till it's flush against the crankshaft. Flip the engine upside down, and then I push the piston back away from the crank about maybe an 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Put a few drops of oil in there, and then rotate the crank to close that gap, and then put the cap on, and pull oil on the journal, put the cap on, torque the nuts to, on these engines I torque the nuts to 45 foot-pounds. These engines have been done for years and years. The torque is common, it's about 42 to 45 foot-pounds. So about to do all that and wrap this video up. Okay, here's one new tip I can give you. I haven't just started doing. So like I said, I pushed the rod in from the top all the way in until it bottomed out on this rod journal. And then to get oil in the bearing, between the journal and the bearing, I pushed the piston back down about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. And to do that, I take a piece of PEX. It can be red, blue, clear, don't matter. And it's about maybe 2.5 inches long, and that way it goes over the bolt, so that the bolt, you don't push on the bolt with your hand. I just put my palm on it and push down, and I can push the piston back down. So you can see now I've got a gap. I got a gap in there to put oil in, and then I'll put the oil in the bearings on. Okay, the engine's now repaired. All 8 pistons are in. Again, the subject of this video was fixing a rod that was on the piston backwards, using my do-it-yourself, homemade, jury rig, redneck methods, whatever you want to call it. So, but I fixed the motor, so that's the bottom line. So this wraps up this video. I'm now about to close up for the night, and I'm going to start on the heads tomorrow. I'm going to put the cylinder heads on. By the way, this is right now I've got 1 coat of primer and 1 coat of gloss black. It's Rust-Oleum farm grade paint. This stuff right here. It's gloss black. I buy it from Tractor Supply. This stuff is tough. It's very, once it dries, it's hand painted with a brush. It goes on thick, and it makes a very thick, nice coating of the block. So I'm going to put 1 more coating on this block before I'm done. I'm going to wait until I get the oil pan and the heads on it before I finish painting the rest of it. So that wraps up the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button. Do a little dance. Whatever you want to do. Thanks for watching.